Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping right into Nehemiah chapter 10.
Right. We've seen the walls go up, the law read out.
Yeah, that big moment of recommitment.
Exactly. And chapter 10 is where, well, the rubber meets the road. It's all about the specific commitments.
It's them sealing a formal covenant, isn't it? And laying out exactly how they plan to live
Yeah.
according to the law and, crucially, support the temple.
Precisely. It's moving from we promise to here's how we'll do it. It's like the community's action plan for living out their values.
Okay, so let's start right at the top.
Yeah.
The sealing of the covenant. Who actually puts their seal on this thing first?
Well, the text makes it pretty clear. Leadership leads the way. Nehemiah, the governor, his name is right there at the start.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and then you get representatives from the key groups, the priests, the Levites, and the leaders or heads of the people.
And it lists actual names, doesn't it? Not just titles.
Oh, yeah, lots of names. You get Sariah, Azariah, a whole bunch of priests. Then, for the Levites, names like Jeshua, Benui, Kadmiel pop up. And from the leaders, Parish, Path Moab, Elam, it goes on.
Why list all the names, do you think?
It personalizes it, right? These aren't just roles. They're individuals making a binding commitment for their groups. That act of sealing was a very formal legal and religious act. Super significant.
Okay, so the leaders sign on the dotted line, so to speak. But it wasn't just them.
No, absolutely not. That's a key point. After the leaders seal it, the text says the rest of the people join in.
And how did they join? Just by nodding along.
Not quite. It says they joined with their nobles and entered into a curse and an oath. Pretty strong language.
A curse and an oath. Wow.
Yeah, and this included basically everyone else, the other priests, Levites, the gatekeepers, the singers, temple servants.
Wait, and it mentioned something specific about separation, right?
Right. Everyone who had separated themselves from the neighboring peoples for the sake of the law of God. That's a really important definition of who they are now.
Defining themselves by their commitment to the law, setting themselves apart.
Exactly. And it wasn't just the men either.
Oh.
No, the text is explicit. Their wives, their sons, and their daughters, all who could understand.
So, families. Anyone old enough to get what was happening was part of it.
Community-wide, embedding this commitment right through the generations.
Okay, back to that curse and an oath. That sounds incredibly serious. What did it really involve?
It's about the strongest way you could possibly commit. An oath is a solemn promise to God. Adding a curse means you're basically saying, may God judge me if I break this promise.
So, maximum stakes.
Totally. Underscoring the gravity of their promise to follow God's law given through Moses and to carefully obey all the commands, regulations, and decrees. A vow of obedience, essentially.
Right. So they make this huge overarching promise. Then the chapter gets really specific almost immediately. What's first on the list?
Well, they start with things that directly impacted their daily lives and their interactions with others. Things where their identity might be challenged. First up, marriage.
Ah, yes. The promise not to give their daughters in marriage to the peoples around them or take daughters from those peoples for their sons.
Exactly. This links straight back to that idea of separation for the sake of the law.
Because intermarriage had been a problem before.
A huge problem historically. It often led to syncretism, mixing Israelite faith with other religious practices. So this was drawing a clear line to protect their religious identity, a direct lesson learned from the past.
Okay, maintaining distinctiveness. Makes sense. What boundary did they draw next?
Sabbath observance. They pledged specifically not to buy stuff merchandise, grain from neighboring peoples, if they brought it to sell on the Sabbath or any holy day.
So it's not just about them resting, but actively refusing to engage in commerce on the Sabbath, even if others were initiating it.
Precisely. It sets a communal boundary around the Sabbath, protecting its sacredness from, everyday economic pressures. It's saying this day is different even for business.
Clear priorities. Was there anything else related to time or cycles?
Yes, the rhythm of the land itself, the seventh year.
This sabbatical year.
Right. They pledged to let the land rest every seventh year, forego working it, and also to cancel all debts that year.
That's a major commitment from the law. Rest for the land, economic relief.
Absolutely. It showed they were serious about living out the law's principles, even if it meant, a short-term economic hit.
So these first few commitments seem very focused on defining themselves against the outside world marriage, trade on the Sabbath, land cycles.
Yeah, establishing who they are in distinction. But then the focus shifts inwards, big time, towards their collective responsibility for the temple, the house of God, And boy, does it get detailed here.
Right, this is where it feels like they're getting into the operational side of things. How do they plan to fund it all?
Okay, first, a specific annual financial commitment. They pledged to give a third of a shekel each year, per person, presumably.
A set amount, and they knew exactly what it was for.
Oh yeah, the text lays it out. It's like reading a budget proposal.
Oh.
This money was earmarked for the showbread, the regular grain and burnt offerings, all the special offerings for Sabbaths, new moons, appointed feasts, holy offerings, sin offerings for atonement, basically everything needed for the day-to-day and special services of the temple.
So it's like funding the operating costs of their faith community, paying for the actual rituals and services the law required.
Exactly. It shows they got that keeping the temple going required practical, consistent funding, but it wasn't just money.
Sure.
Resources and time, like bringing wood for the altar fire.
How do they organize that?
They agreed to cast lots. Priests, Levites, the people, lots were cast to decide which family group was responsible for bringing wood donations at specific times throughout the year.
So a rota system, basically, to keep the altar fires burning.
Pretty much. It made it a shared scheduled duty, ensuring it got done. Can't have sacrifices without fire, right?
True. A small detail, but essential. What about farm produce and animals?
Also covered. They committed to bring the first fruits, the first pickings of their crops and fruit trees to the house of the Lord each year.
And firstborns, too.
Yes, just like the law says. The firstborn of their sons, and also the firstborn of their cattle, herds, and flocks. These were brought to the priests serving at the temple.
That's powerful.
Yep.
Giving the very first, the best, back to God. A tangible way of putting God first.
It really is. And then the chapter dives even deeper into contributions and the whole tithe system.
Right, bringing the first of their ground meal, fruit, wine, oil. Where did that go?
To the storerooms, designated for the priests, supporting them directly. And then there's the tithe, a tenth of the crops from the ground.
Who collected that?
That went directly to the Levites. They were responsible for collecting it in all the towns where people worked.
Because the Levites didn't have their own land inheritance, right? This was their support.
Correct. The law set it up that way.
Yeah.
But there's another layer here, an oversight mechanism.
Oh, what was that?
It says a priest, one of Aaron's descendants, had to be with the Levites when they received the tithes.
Ah, accountability.
Yeah.
Connecting it back to the temple priesthood.
Exactly. And then the Levites themselves had a duty. They had to take a tenth of the tithes they received.
A tithe of the tithes.
You got it. And bring that portion up to the house of God into the treasury storerooms.
Wow. Okay, so people tithe to Levites, a priest watches. Levites tithe part of that to the temple treasury. It sounds, well, complicated but thorough.
It's detailed, for sure. It shows they were really thinking about a sustainable economic model for the whole religious structure. And one final point on contributions.
Yeah.
It says the people of Israel, and the Levites too, were supposed to bring their general contributions, grain, new wine, oil, directly to these storerooms.
And these storerooms were key hubs, right?
Yeah.
Holding sanctuary items, housing staff.
Precisely. So these commitments ensured the storerooms were stocked, supporting the whole operation, the rituals, the priests, the Levites, gatekeepers, singers.
Okay, so after all that detail, the shekels, the wood, the first fruits, the complex tithe system,
Yeah.
how does this section wrap up?
It ends with this incredibly simple but powerful summary statement.
Which is,
We will not neglect the house of our God.
wow. So all those rules, all that organization, it all comes down to that one promise.
That's the driving force. Don't let the center of everything fall apart again. All the details are just the practical means to fulfill that core commitment.
It's taking that feeling of dedication and turning it into actual systems and responsibilities so that it lasts.
Exactly. It shows a real maturity, understanding that big ideals need, well, consistent, practical, sometimes mundane effort from everyone.
So stepping back, what does this deep dive into Nehemiah 10 really tell us about this community right at this point in their story?
It tells me they were incredibly serious about rebuilding their society, not just the city walls. They remembered why they went into exile, partly through neglect of the law and the temple. So coming back, they knew that securing their future meant a deep, binding commitment to live out their covenant in every practical way. Marriage, Sabbath, finances, supporting the temple, it was all connected.
And the sheer level of detail.
Yeah.
It says a lot about their priorities, doesn't it?
It really does. It wasn't enough to just say, we'll follow God. They had to spell out how. What does that look like for our families, our economy, our worship? They were literally writing the blueprint for their renewed society.
And spreading the load, making it a collective responsibility, not just on the leaders.
Yeah, from Nehemiah down to the family bringing wood or the farmer bringing his first fruits, everyone had a part to play. It's a picture of collective buy-in.
It really underscores how complex it is to build or rebuild a community around shared values,
Mhm.
especially after a major disruption like exile. You need the vision, sure, but you also need the nitty-gritty plan and everyone pulling together.
Which kind of brings us to a final thought, maybe for you listening.
Yeah, think about that challenge,
Yep.
translating big, important values, whether it's faith or justice or community well-being, into concrete, specific, everyday actions and commitments that everyone understands and shares responsibility for. How do you make that stick over the long haul, when the initial excitement wears off? That's a challenge they face then, and it's definitely still a challenge for any group trying to achieve something meaningful together today.